Welcome to BW Healthcare World. Today is World Alzheimer's Day. My guest today is Dr. VP Singh, who is the chairperson of the Institute of Neurosciences at Medanta, the Medicity. He has special interest in brain tumor surgeries, cerebrovascular surgeries, epilepsy surgery, and radiosurgery. He has operated over 400 intracranial aneurysms and is actively involved in the treatment of arteriovenous malformations by radiosurgery techniques. Welcome to BW Healthcare, Dr. VP Singh. Dr. Singh, what is Alzheimer's disease? What causes Alzheimer?
So Alzheimer's is a type of dementia, which is basically a degenerative disorder in the spine, in the brain. So the cells of the brain are becoming weak and they're not functioning normally. And they manifest in a particular manner with loss of memory, etc. So let me here try to differentiate between dementia and Alzheimer's, because this is a very common thing people ask. Dementia is a gamut of disorders where the brain cells, the mental activities have reduced. The commonest type of dementia is Alzheimer's. And about 2/3 of all dementias are Alzheimer's. There are other causes of dementia also, which a neurologist tries to differentiate. And there are a very small subgroup of dementias which are medically or surgically treatable and where good outcomes can be expected. But the majority of dementias, there is no surgical or medical treatment, and it's a pattern of degeneration in the brain, the commonest being Alzheimer's.
So, Dr. Singh, what we have commonly heard is that Alzheimer's or dementia usually happens in the old age. Is that correct, or can Alzheimer's happen at any age?
So the majority of cases, it occurs in the elderly, but if one is perceptive, one can start picking up signs in the fifth decade, in the 50s and the 60s. So there are very certain signs which then gradually progress over a period of many years and become manifest. And the florid dementia, where the person does not recognize his family, cannot remember things, that occurs by the time they are in the 70s or 80s. Very rarely, younger people can also have dementia. And there we have to work them up for other causes, which may be treatable or may not be treatable. But yes, you're right. The majority of them occur in the elderlies, although the process starts in the late 50s.
So in that case, what are the kind of symptoms that people in the early 50s or late 50s should be keeping a watch for so that they can catch the disease or the beginning of a disease at an early stage?
So the most common presentation is lack of memory, a memory impairment. Now, this is something where there are multiple causes. A lot of patients come to me and say, oh, I'm sort of losing my memory, I keep forgetting, and am I getting Alzheimer's? So, today's life, there's a lot of stress in everybody's life. Everybody's running, everybody's sort of trying to go ahead and move forward in their professions and personal lives. So when one is very stressed out, at that time also, your mind is not concentrating. You are liable to forget things which you think are not very consequential or important. And therefore, high-stressed individuals also have that same feeling of loss of memory. But in a person with Alzheimer's, these changes are more persistent. It's not, situational. It's not something which happens one week and next week is a high-functioning individual. So if it is more persistent, and more importantly, it increases with time. So the time progression often tells us that this is not a simple forgetfulness by being busy, but It is something which is more sinister than that. And memory loss is the most common thing, which is the first symptom which comes. The other thing which comes is they become slow in their day-to-day activities. Routine tasks which one would do without even a second thought becomes a core for them. They have to sort of really make efforts to do it, and simple things, they get confused. And a lot of it is related to spatial disorientation, what we call, which means that the person becomes forgetful, and a task which he was very familiar doing, suddenly he's a bit confused in going there. For example, a person may be in his own house, he knows where the bathroom is, for example. But a stage comes when he feels, he's looking around. I've got to go to the toilet. Where do I go to? Which direction do I go to? They also lose track of time. So this time disorientation also occurs. So these are features which come up at a later stage, but the initial symptom is mainly loss of memory.
So does dementia or does Alzheimer's pass on from generation to generation? Is it something which is hereditary? Have you seen or observed this?
There is a genetic basis to it, but it's not a very strong correlation. More commonly, it is seen more because people are living longer. And the longer you live, the more chances that we will have this disease and one will pick it up. So life expectancy now has increased from when we had independence, it was in the 30s or 40s. Even as much as 20 years ago, it was 50s to 60s. And now the life expectancy is over 70. So the longer you live, then the degenerative changes which are occurring are going to manifest. And that is how it's seen much more commonly now compared to earlier. But we do find that people whose family members have dementia, some of them may develop, but that's provided they live long enough.
Got it.
So, but even if you don't have a family history, you're equally prone to develop dementia.
So in today's day and age, when we have genetic testing which has come about and which can to a very large extent predict the occurrence or the likelihood of the occurrence of a certain disease, do you think these genetic testings can predict Alzheimer's in your life?
I won't be too optimistic about that. I don't think it is worthwhile getting your genetic testing done because the association is not very strong. And there is no point worrying a person that, you have a potential of, getting this issue. It's not just for Alzheimer's. For Alzheimer's, the sort of thing is very, very low. And I would straight away say no to genetic testing for it. Even for a lot of other diseases, there are very few diseases which are so specific that a genetic testing is worthwhile. In the majority, it says, yes, you have this gene, so there is a potential you may develop this disease in the future. So it should not be a fishing expedition. Genetic testing is always worthwhile and interpretable if you have a specific question in mind and you're doing it for a special purpose. I had my genetic testing done some years ago, and they gave me a book which was 230 pages or something, telling me every gene and what is the chance and what are the associations with it. And, just to go through it was a nightmare. And in the end, being a doctor, I said, and this is all nonsense. If you have a 20% chance of developing this disease and a 25% chance of developing the other disease, it really doesn't matter. So when the disease comes, we look after it. But there are certain disorders which have a very strong genetic predisposition and where we can do something about it. That is important. Unless it's an actionable thing, there is no point telling a person that, you could develop this. But for dementia, certainly no, a clear no.
So are there any stages that we have in Alzheimer's? And if there are, can you explain for the benefit of our audience?
So generally we say there are three stages: a mild stage, moderate, and a severe stage. Now these are very general phases. In the mild stage, you get these minor changes of memory disturbance or visual spatial disorientation, but the patient needs a normal life. It's not something which is easily picked up. There are warning signals, but not much that we can the patient actually can lead a normal life. The moderate situation is where people start getting symptoms which are easily recognizable. It is affecting their day-to-day life to some degree, but it's a very slowly progressive disease, so things are gradually getting worse. In the severe cases, the patient becomes totally dependent. He's not able to lead a normal life. Even with assistance, he cannot do normal things. So he needs to be fed, he needs to be taken to the toilet, he doesn't know his own good. So he needs definitive, persistent and continuous home care or an attendant to look after him. In general, Alzheimer's is something which happens slowly. It progresses very slowly, and ultimately it will become severe. In general, we say it takes about 8 to 10 years for the progression to take place to a severe stage. If the progression is occurring much more rapidly, then that's a red herring. That's a red flag for us. Not a red herring, a red flag for us. If it is happening very rapidly, then we have to investigate why is the worsening so rapid, which is not a normal pattern of Alzheimer's. And then there are certain other metabolic factors. The sugars may be haywire, the oxygenation may not be normal, the electrolytes may be disturbed. So there are various other factors we have to look for to see why the worsening is so rapid.
So what are the treatment options for Alzheimer's? And can this be cured? And if, or at any stage?
Now that's $1 million question. Unfortunately, there is no cure for Alzheimer's. And even the medications that we give are not really very effective. Although we say some of them do reduce the speed at which it progresses, it is a progressive disease. It's a degenerative disorder which will continue, which will progress. And there is not very much we can do with that, about it. However, one should not be totally pessimistic. There are a lot of behavioral therapies. There are a lot of things that we can actively do to prevent the progression of Alzheimer's. Although the medical treatment is not there, it is when recognized that the more active you are mentally, the lesser the rate of progression, the better you will be. So people who are have very early stages, they must remain mentally active. They must have some hobby or some activity, maybe play Sudoku or something, some mental activity where your mind is active. They must have lots of social interaction. The more social interactions you have, the more active your brain remains. And we also want them to be physically active, because once dementia comes in, then your breathing does get affected. Your lung capacities go down. So one must be physically active so that the other secondary complications which set in, they should not occur or they are delayed. And one should also do things in a particular routine, in a sort of methodical manner, in a way where a systematic thing is done. For example, one has to develop a system. Okay, I'm going to get up at this time. I'm going to go to the toilet. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to eat breakfast at this time. Then I have to go for a walk. This is my nap time. So once you establish a rhythm in your body, when the mind is not fully functioning, that biological rhythm or the setting that you've done in your body would help you to continue doing your day-to-day activities. So this is something which is extremely important, that the body will know, okay, now it's time to get up and get ready. So this set of activities are still what we can do. Unfortunately, we don't have a cure for Alzheimer's. There's a lot of research going on because it is a problem. It's a problem of care. You know, if you have a person who's got Alzheimer's and he needs constant care, there's a lot of money, time, effort kept to keep the patient, your loved one, comfortable. You know, people, families, sometimes somebody has to partly sacrifice the job to look after the father or mother who's like that. I mean, luckily we have good family support systems in India. And that is, I think, an advantage. But with the breakdown of the joint family into nuclear families, even that is coming under stress. But it is a huge challenge for the government or the individual to look after these patients. And with improvements in nutrition, improvements in medical care, the lifespan of people is increasing. And we are going to be facing a problem with a large number of patients who need monitoring and help. So in that sense, it's a huge economic burden on a country and the individual. And lots and billions of dollars are being spent on research. I'm hopeful that at some stage we will make a breakthrough and we will be able to help these patients.
Dr. Singh, now we have out-of-hospital care that has come up in a very big way, especially after COVID. The acceptance of remote monitoring, etc., has given it a rise. Now, when it comes to creating a center for old people, do you think it is a mandatory requirement that people with dementia or Alzheimer's must have a separate kind of a facility rather than being clubbed with a general out-of-hospital care or a senior care?
Yes, I think the best would be that, you know, even though they have dementia, they may have some recognition of very close family and friends. So if one can organize such a setup at home, I think there's nothing better than that. There's nothing more comfortable for the person to be looked after and surrounded by people whom they know. And if it's my father or my mother, obviously I will look after them much better. The moment you leave it to a servant, these people do get mistreated at times, especially when nobody is watching. So for such situations where a personal care is not possible or intense monitoring is not possible, yes, there would be need for a senior care where these people are looked after in a humane manner, in a proper manner. And these things have already come up in the West. And I think it's only a matter of time when this will come up in India also. But yes, there is going to be a need for people like this and care systems so that they can live their life with dignity and compassion.
Is there any recommendations of certain care that you need to keep in mind while taking care of an Alzheimer's patient at home?
When, as I said, the activities of daily living have to be looked after very carefully. Then they have to have a degree of physical exercise and movement, which is very, very essential. If you keep them in bed, they're going to develop complications. Their nutrition has to be looked after. They won't be able to ask for food. And the bowel habits have to be looked at. Bladder and bowel habits have to be looked after. So these are the crux of the things. Plus, as I said, a set routine which they have to follow so that it gets ingrained in their body and helps in the management. And as I said, social interaction before they are too far gone. some mental activities is something which is, which would be very helpful. For the minor cases where they've just started, in abroad, I've seen there are places, sort of daycare centers, so to say. So the van comes in the morning, takes your father, he goes to the center where he has social interaction with people of his age, whom they can relate to. They spend time together, they do some activities together, they have some physical exercises or therapies. They have the food together in a group of friends or people who like them. And in the evening, the van comes and brings you home so that you're with the family. Now, that is an excellent system which will really help. But, this needs a lot of environment and proper care. But I think if we can manage to develop this in the as this sort of setup here, it would really do wonders for people with early dementia to try to keep them active as long as possible.
So can Alzheimer's lead to fatality, death?
Well, not directly. What happens is that once they become, the Alzheimer becomes severe, or they are bedridden, or not properly exercising and looked after, they develop infections. And they often get chest infections or urinary infections. And then that spreads and becomes a cause of death. So Alzheimer directly doesn't cause death because the brain parts which are with the higher mental functioning, the mental facilities, the cognition, the attention, the motivation, these are affected. But the basic body functions are still functioning. Until lack of movement, more prone to infections, they get an infection, and that is how they usually pass away.
So are there any taboos associated with Alzheimer's?
Not really. I mean, more than the stigmas, I think what we need is to recognize this early. For example, a person may say, "Maine khana kha liya?" You said yes, we just had food. And after an hour, they'll ask again, "Maine khana kha liya? Meko khana de do." So the natural tendency is to get a little irritated. Why are you asking the same question again? We just had food. Or they may come and ask for food, and you get irritated. Now, this is where we have to be sensitive. We have to recognize that this is not something which is in the control of the person. So if he's repeating these things, it's because he genuinely doesn't remember whether he's had food or not. Secondly, his time orientation is gone. He doesn't know it's breakfast time or lunch time or sleeping time or dinner time. So he may sleep at odd hours. And again, this is where we want that the regimentation of what you are doing in the day coming in. So it is, often as youngsters, we get irritated by this sort of behavior. And whereas we have to realize that it's not in our elders' domain to understand and do it. So stigmas are not generally there for dementia. It's just that we don't recognize the early signs and do get irritated and sort of speak badly. In the advanced stage, neglect, yes, does come in sometimes. So even if you've got a help at home, a servant or attendant to look after your ailing father or mother, I think a degree of supervision and involvement of the person himself or herself is necessary. If you leave it only on the attendant or servants, then there is a potential for sort of neglect and not proper care.
So what do you think needs to be done to create awareness of Alzheimer's, as well as create a situation of acceptance so that people are not in denial of during the beginning of the disease?
So I think the main thing is creating awareness. And this celebrating the World's Alzheimer's Day is one way of creating awareness, to spread the message when this is what could happen, is going to happen to all of us if we live long enough. So, we have to create the awareness that this is possible. This is what happens. We need to be careful. We need to monitor. If there's an early sign, see a neurologist who would get an investigation done. As I said, as a neurologist, my most important thing would be to find, is the cause of this dementia treatable? There are certain things where we can do the treatment. For example, there is a thing called normal pressure hydrocephalus, where the fluid accumulates in the brain. Now, it could be because of shrinkage of the brain because of dementia, but it may be under pressure. So that is a situation which has a certain slightly different presentation, which we always look out for. Because if we find that, we are very happy. I mean, we have to do a surgery. The family may not be happy, but that's a treatable cause of dementia. There may be a thyroid problem, which could be contributing to appearing as dementia. So what we have to differentiate as a neurologist, first of all, is whether it is true dementia and Alzheimer's, or is it something else which is mimicking it and which is treatable. So first is awareness. Second is we have to consult a proper neurophysician rather than just dismiss it, umar badh gayi hai, so it's happening. Because even though small, there are certain types of dementias which are treatable. And lastly, we have to know how to deal with them. This is the most important. I think people need to know that these are the things, the activities one can do to keep your beloved father or mother in as good as condition for as long as possible.
Sir, is there a message that you would want to give personally on this World Alzheimer's Day?
Yes, it is a problem which we all have to face, which is going to affect our loved ones, and ultimately it is going to affect us also. So let us recognize the early signs. Let us get an appropriate evaluation done by a neurologist, and let us institute certain measures which can help our loved one to remain active for as long as possible.
Sir, thank you so much for your time. It was really, really insightful to listen to all the things that you have told us about Alzheimer's and dementia. I really appreciate your taking out time for Business World Healthcare. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.